So what was the symbolism attached to the moon?
Ah, yes, the moon. That's a particularly easy one to understand, I think, the moon, because unlike Jupiter and Mars, the moon is very obvious in the night sky. You can't miss it. And everybody knows about the moon, and you can see it waxing and waning and it rising and setting. Sometimes it's very large, sometimes it's slightly red or even blue. So the moon is very changeable. And it's that changeability which was the main kind of influence of Luna, as she was called in medieval thought. So when the moon was strong and exerting its influence, people would begin changing. They would change their location, so you would become a wanderer, a traveller. You might change your mental frame of mind. You might, try out some other kind of identity. You might start behaving oddly, and that's where we get the word lunacy from. Someone who is mentally unstable, mentally changeable, is a lunatic because of the lunar influence that is being exerted upon them. The moon is also associated with water, moisture, because of the connection between the lunar gravitational pull and the tides. And also because the moon itself seems to lap, as the moon waxes and wanes, the moon herself is kind of constantly ebbing and flowing. So there are these connections with water. And of course silver. Just as the sun's metal is gold, so the moon's metal is silver. So when it comes to the silver chair, you could almost guess it from the title alone, because silver is there, the moon's metal is there in the very title. But let's first of all talk about changeability. According to medieval thought, everything above the orbit of the moon was perfect and fixed and certain. But below the orbit of the moon, everything was subject to doubt and confusion and uncertainty, mutability. And that divide, that lunar divide, it was a major boundary in medieval cosmological thought. Lewis writes about it a good deal in The Discarded Image. So in the silver chair, you find that built into the very structure of the story. The story starts in Aslan's country, where everything is perfect and certain and fixed and without any kind of breath of air.
Or doubt.
Aslan then sends Jill and Eustace down into Narnia, and he warns Jill,
that's right.
The air will thicken down there, and things will not look to you the same down there as they appear to you up on my high mountain. So there you have built into the very structure of the story this passing down from the realm of certainty to the realm of confusion. And that division between certainty and confusion is repeated later on in the story when they go down even further into the witch's realm below Narnia, the underworld kingdom, where things are even more confusing. And the witch tries to convince them that her underworld kingdom is the only world.
And there's no such thing as the sun.
There's no such thing as the sun. There's no overworld. There's no fixity. There's no perfection. There's no certitude. And it's there in the underworld kingdom that they find the lost prince, Rilian, locked up in a silver chair, raving like a lunatic 1 hour in every 24. The word lunatic is actually used of Rilian, the lost prince. So that's part of how the silver chair reflects the changeability of Luna. We've talked about the silver chair. Another aspect is the wetness. I don't know if you remember how wet the silver chair is. It's a book full of rain and rivers and
tears.
Snow and tears and even a character called Puddleglum. I mean, Puddleglum's name is very carefully chosen, and he comes from a race of marsh wiggles who do wet and watery work, we're told. And he's always predicting floods and storms, and he's 3 times described as a wet blanket. And, this kind of soggy atmosphere, if you like, is there from the very first page of the book. When Jill and Eustace are at school and there are water drops dripping off the leaves and the grass is wet, And this wetness is beginning to strike the key note of the story, which is to say the lunar influence, which runs through the whole book. Water is by nature unstable. It's not solid ground. So this whole kind of spectrum of qualities is how Lewis structures the silver chair. And one little kind of ornamental detail is nice to note. In mythology, the moon, Luna, or Cynthia she was sometimes called, she had a whole range of different names. She drove her lunar chariot across the heavens, and it was pulled by two horses. One was black and the other was white. And you can see these in various engravings and etchings and medieval woodcuts and things like that. And C.S. Lewis has two horses in the silver chair, and they are called Coal Black and Snowflake. And those names are carefully chosen of the moon. It's a beautiful thing.
Very carefully written.
Very carefully written. It's so clever.
Even the drunkenness of Puddleglum.
Or even Puddleglum's drunkenness, which always perplexed me when I was a child, thinking, well, why does the main character get drunk in this book? But it's because, it's meant to suggest the confusion, the stupidness, the lunacy of getting sozzled, getting drunk, and the fact that it arises from liquid is again appropriate. And then, of course, the children, having gone down into the underworld, eventually come back up out of it and return to Aslan's country at the end of the book. And the final chapter is called The Healing of Harms. And that's when all the problems related to the lunar influence are kind of undone. And it's a beautiful, moving chapter. But ends comically. You remember they go back to England, Eustace and Jill, they go back to their terrible school, and the headmistress sees them coming, dressed in their marvellous costumes with swords, and she sees a lion, and she goes tearing around the school, screaming out like a lunatic. And again, she herself, the headmistress, is a lunatic. And so Lewis has a bit of fun here, and she's, because of her lunacy, the school inspectors realise she's no good as a headmistress, so she becomes a school inspector to interfere with other heads. And when she's no good at that, they get her into Parliament where she lives happily ever after.